You're listening to the Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
All right, hello, welcome to, I think this will go up right around mid-February, maybe the weekend or the week of Valentine's Day. By the time you're listening to this, we will have been through the first 6 weeks of the year, which is always exciting to me because that means we're moving towards spring, and spring is one of my favorite seasons. I really like all of the seasons. I'm not an overly big fan of some of the things that come with winter, but I really enjoyed winter this year, the looks of it. I was thinking this morning as I was walking out to my vehicle and it was snowing again, I was thinking, man, I'd be okay if it wasn't snowing right now and it wasn't quite so cold. But I have enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty winter so far, at least here in Michigan. I don't know about where you're living. Maybe write in and tell me, what do you like? What are your favorite seasons? That's really not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to visit a topic that I think is so important that I want to visit it regularly. My future son-in-law helps me with my marketing, and I sent him a message about a week ago or 3 weeks ago. I said, hey, make sure that we get these 4 rules of life up regularly. I want to make sure that we get them up on the repeat, because if you forget everything, if I die today, I want people to remember certain things about me, and one of them is these 4 rules, which are not original with me. They were given to me when I was first teaching, 25 years ago or so. I was teaching in Northern Virginia at a crazy school, like literally crazy stuff happened there. And one of my fellow teachers was a guy that I actually went to college with. He came briefly. His brother and I were in the same dorm for 4 years, and he went to a different school and came in. I don't remember why. Anyhow, he gave me these 4 lists of rules. I was a coach at the time. We were doing some fun things with the athletics there, and he gave me this sheet of paper. He said, hey, this last school that I coached at, there was another coach there who had his students learn these 4 rules, his athletes, and so I thought you might like them. And I don't know that coach's name, so Mr. Whoever you are, this is my attempt to give you credit for these 4 rules. But I have made my kids learn these 4 rules throughout life. Anytime I have found a situation in life that applied to them, anytime my kids have talked to me about something or said something to me that seemed to be addressed by one of these 4 rules, I would say the rules to my kids. Tell me what the 4 rules of life are. Over time, I added a 5th rule as kind of a bonus rule that we'll go over today. When I was an athletic director and a coach, in order to letter, you had to be able to quote these 4 rules to me. When I was a teacher, if you did something that violated one of these 4 rules, that was typically my discipline. You had to write a short paragraph for me on what rule you violated, why you violated it, as in how it was violated, and how you would adjust for future change. That's how important I think these are. They're hard for me to remember. Well, not hard for me to remember. I could quote them probably backwards if I wanted to. I've been doing it for so long. But right now, like, my wife and I are in a really hard time of life, and I have to remember these 4 rules, and it can be easy to dismiss them. It can be easy to just be like, well, okay, those are 4 rules for other people, but they're not for me. But they are for me, and I have to lean into them. I have to remember them. When I need to get things done, I need to remember these 4 rules. And I've shared them on the podcast before. I actually thought about downloading that episode, rehashing it a little bit, and then putting it back up. But I'm just going to keep sharing it. I don't know how long this podcast is going to go. I've talked on here before about ending it. But as long as it goes, these rules of life are going to be part of a regular production process, because I really think that they can be transformative. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with me on my faith. You don't have to agree with me on many things. But these 4 rules are transformative for anyone who decides to put them into their life and practice out of them. Okay, so that's probably enough lead into this. I'm just going to go ahead and share the 4 rules with you. This may be one of my shorter episodes. But rule number 1, life's not fair. Get over it. Here's one of the things that we run into all the time in life. When we start to get mad, we waste energy chasing down fair. I will often tell my kids, fair's a place where you pay people to pet pigs. If you're not paying people to pet pigs, and you don't see anybody paying people to pet pigs, wasting energy on, well, that's not fair, is literally wasting energy that you could be using to solve the problem that you're avoiding by wasting energy. Rule number 1 simply says it's an acceptance of a reality that life just is not fair. I wish it was. Believe me, I don't know if I wish it was, because fair, I think if we really understood fair, we wouldn't want it. But I get the injustice of life, and we should fight for justice. But fair is a different thing. And we can sit there and we can talk about how unfair something is. You know, I think about this a lot with kids, especially. If something isn't fair, they just kind of shut down because we let them. And then they become adults who shut down when life isn't fair. But it's so rarely fair. And often when we are living in this, we're engaging in a narrative that's probably not going to suit us well. We're engaging in a narrative that is probably going to create distress for us because we're not engaging in healthy activity, which is, how do I move forward? How do I solve the problem in front of me? We're too busy lamenting and perhaps whining that life isn't fair. So the practical application of this is that, you just look at life and you have to ask yourself, what's going on here and how am I responding? These rules are about how we respond to things. And we can look at something and say, hey, that isn't fair. But how much time and energy do we give it if we're going to move forward? The practical application is, obviously with our kids, they're going to encounter unfair things. They're going to have teachers that are not fair. They're going to have coaches that they don't feel are fair. I'm working with a parent right now who has a 15-year-old child who is not a very well-behaved child, not a very respectful child. And part of that is because he was raised to have expectations that aren't real. And this rule is about good expectations, that life just is not fair. And the sooner we're willing to accept that and not give the unfairness of it too much energy, especially as it relates to us. If we want to talk about, well, that's unfair for those other people and I'm gonna work so that they have a more equitable situation, that is probably a different conversation, of an important conversation. But the conversation about how it relates to us, how fair is it, is an irrelevant conversation most of the time. Life's not fair, get over it. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, life changes, adjust. One of the first things that we have to accept as human beings is that life rarely stays the same, and we typically hate change. We typically despise change. We typically don't like change. Now, this rule does live in tension with another kind of truism that I'll often say to my clients, that all change is loss, and all loss should be grieved. But life is always going to change. If you adjust, you change with it. If you don't, you'll lose. You will stop growing. And that's what I mean by lose. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to, be the number one and whatever. But you will lose the moment you stop growing, the moment you stop adjusting and moving forward with life. You lose because you're stuck then in a place and a time. And I see this a lot. People get stuck. We get stuck. I get stuck. And we get stuck because we're chasing something that used to be. The practical application of this is that I have to learn to embrace change. I have to learn to accept change and really move beyond accepting it to what I call that hug. I have to embrace it. And I see this often with my clients, right? They'll come in, and I'm thinking of a couple in particular. They don't like the relationship that they have. They don't like the interactions that they have, and for good reason. But they have been relatively resistant to any homework that I give them, and I don't give a lot of homework. And it's not even that I think that they don't want to do the homework. It's that the homework is different. It's change, and they don't like the change of it. This can be something that can be difficult for all of us. I know it's difficult for me. When something changes from how I'm used to it being, that can be very difficult then for me to go ahead and move forward into that change and accept that, you know what, this is part of life. Change happens. I worked at a local hospital, a very large local hospital for a while. And I remember every time change would come, people would get upset. And I often would say to them, but you said you didn't like the old way. But this change isn't the way that I want it. Or for those of you who are old enough, do you remember when Facebook first came out, it went to our phones. Do you remember, like, for those of you, you have to be old enough to remember Facebook when it didn't have a news feed. People lost their minds every time Facebook would make a change. I mean, griping and complaining and getting mad. Now, it's a free thing, right? Facebook is relatively free. The libertarians in us might argue that it costs you your freedom or privacy, excuse me. But it's free. And people would lose their minds when there was changes that they didn't countenance. Which is why rule number 2 says life changes, adjust. If you don't adjust to the change, you get stuck. You fall behind. You do not grow. Sir Kenneth Robinson talks about this in some of his books. I saw him lecture a few years ago. And he said, one of the things that happens, if you don't change, you will find yourself wonderfully prepared for a world that no longer exists. So one of the things that I want my kids to learn and that I want to live out is the truth that life changes, you have to adjust to it. Life changes, you have to adjust to it. If you don't adjust to it, you're stuck. So the first rule is life's not fair, get over it. Second rule is life changes, adjust. The third rule is life's tough, be tougher. And this is probably one of the hardest rules for myself because there are times I don't want to be tough. If I'm honest, there are times that I would rather just let life happen to me. I don't want my kids to be tough because toughness is on the other side of hard. I think this is one of the things that we seek when we become obsessed with sports activities or with working out. We want toughness, and that is a great way to build it. There is a psychological rule that says if you do tough things, whatever the tough thing is, that muscle memory in your body will follow through into other areas. So if you are disciplined and going to the gym and doing tough things at the gym, then that will follow through in other things of your life. That is a truism. It is a rule that exists mostly. But sometimes it doesn't, and that is because sometimes we like going to the gym and we don't like doing other things. And so this rule, what it says is look, yeah, it's going to be hard. In fact, one of the things that I often hear from people, and I sit with people across all spectrums of grief, and we'll talk about, okay, where do you want to go? And when they tell me, like, okay, well, these are your probable behaviors that you're going to need to engage in to get to the spot where you want to be. And they'll often say, well, that's going to be really hard. Yeah, because rule 3 is life's tough, be tougher. That does not mean that we should dismiss the hardness of life. That does not mean that we should dismiss that it's tough. If anything, this rule means that we should actually accept it in a way that says, yeah, I know that life is tough, and I'm going to run this out in a way that says I will be tougher. Erwin McManus, one of my favorite authors, speakers, he says, when you come to a challenge that you do not currently have the capacity to, this is me probably misquoting it, but I think I'm going to do the idea of what he says justice. When you come to a space where you do know this is your capacity and the challenge is up here, you really have two choices. You can either bring the challenge down to your capacity. In other words, you can readjust your goals and just say that's unattainable. Or you can increase your capacity to achieve your goals. And this becomes hard because we tend to think of success as a one-time thing. I did it once, I was successful, now I can kind of rest. Maybe you don't. Maybe that's just me and the people I hang out with. But it is a painful truth that is not how it works. It is a painful truth that success is bought every day. It's rented every day. Every day when you get up, you've got to go back and work at the things that you did yesterday to keep your skills up. You've got to go back and engage. If you're going to want to make a difference in people's lives, you have to expect to be hurt. You have to expect for people to misrepresent you. You have to expect for people to lie about you. You have to expect for people to reject the things that you have offered them. And you still have to keep optimism. That's tough because life is tough. Be tougher. Life is difficult. Be tougher. Life is hard. Be tougher. The practical outworking of this is you build tough by going through tough things. And that's the part that I want to avoid. I would like to be tough by just avoiding tough things. I would like to be strong by avoiding the breakdown of my muscles. I would like to be strong and tough by having an easy, cushy life. But that isn't how it works. In other episodes, I've talked about this. I do this exercise with people where we do agree-disagree statements, and we talk about our inner dialogue. And one of the statements I say is, do you agree or disagree? Life is hard. Almost everybody agrees. It's the next one where I can sort of start sorting people. Life is hard because it's supposed to be hard. I had an older woman as a intern, and she lamented a lot of things that had happened in her life. And when I said this to her, it was as though I had physically assaulted her. Life is not hard because it's supposed to be hard. I was like, whoa, relax. But here's the thing. She didn't do hard things. In fact, she sold her character and told me later, yeah, I lied about that because I got nervous. She sold her character because she didn't build the muscle of tough. That's the real value in these laws or these rules for life. They help you set your place, your expectations for life. They help you set your expectations for how you're going to interact with what's going on in the world around you. Okay, so the first rule, life's not fair, get over it. The second rule, life changes, adjust. The third rule, life's tough, be tougher. The fourth rule is life is short, make it count. We're here and then it's over. There's an ancient writer who said life is like a vapor, right? Like you take a shower and there's all this steam in the bathroom, and you go to your bedroom and you get dressed and you come back, the steam's all gone. It's gone. It's here and it's gone. That is life. And one of the things that I'm constantly wrestling with is, where am I wasting my life? And I think about this. I like playing certain video games. Right now I'm playing a basketball video game. I'm in between. I typically only play baseball and college football. Well, college football just came back out. So I typically only play baseball and then racing with my son, which I don't ever consider that wasting time. But I'm playing basketball. I could be reading when I'm playing basketball. Now, sometimes I will play and listen to an audiobook. So that's a little bit better, maybe redeeming some time there. But there is a thing of, you know what? You need to have time off. You need to turn your brain off. You need to take time to veg, if you will. But life is short. I've said it before. My daughter was mentioning it when she was editing my podcast, that it hit her. I have far less birthdays in front of me than I do behind me. The chances that I double the amount of birthdays that I've had is almost zero. The chances that I increase it by 50%, maybe. My life is short. Will it count? That is a hard question. And I don't say this lightly. I've had people around me pass away in the last year, and their life's over. In fact, we're coming up on the year anniversary of my neighbor passing away. We just passed the 6-month anniversary of his son passing away. I just saw on Facebook someone that I don't know, but they're related to someone I went to college with, passed away young. Life is short, and we don't know how long we have. What are you doing to make your life count? And you know, this is not like, hey, are you going to start some big company? Are you going to write a novel that becomes a bestseller? How are you impacting the people that live in your circle? Let's just start there. How are you impacting the people that live in your circle? How are you making your life count in your community? How are you making your life count with your family? Sometimes this requires that we stop talking to people. I get that. This requires we draw boundaries. But often it requires us to reach out to people and to serve them. And that is not an overly popular idea in 2025. To reach out and serve those we disagree with. If you think Trump is the craziest president we've ever had, and you really want your life to count, here's a challenge. Reach out and serve a Trumper. Like somebody who's way into it. They got the flags and the wig and all the hats. Reach out to them. If you think Trump is the greatest president that we've ever had, find somebody who can't stand his presidency and serve them. Be kind to them. Build a relationship with them. If you want your life to count, it has to be something that goes beyond you. That's the bonus rule. If you want your life to count, it has to be about more than you. And it runs nicely with the fourth rule, which is life is short, make it count. What are you doing to make your life count? And this is a really hard one, because if my life is going to count, I have to make my life about other people. I have to make my life about something beyond the present moment. But it ties all the other rules together, because making my life count will be tough. Making my life count means I'll have to adjust to the changes that life brings me. And I'm going to have to accept the fact that life just is not fair. If you want your life to count, it has to be about more than you. Do not buy into this society lie that we just need more selfish people in the world. That's dumb, it is destructive, and it is scientifically broken. Look at the world around us. Do you really think we need more selfish people? What we need is more people who are willing to do selfless things. What we need is more people that are willing to do things for the betterment of society. What we need is people who are willing to do things because it's the right thing to do. One of the things I talk about a lot is parenting isn't about the parents, and a lot of times we think it is. One of these days I'm going to do an episode on the fact that while you are the most significant voice in your kid's life, you're not the only voice. And every mistake they make isn't necessarily a reflection of you failing or succeeding. But if your life is going to count, it has to be about more than you. And it's short, so make it count. None of us know when we take our last heartbeat. None of us. We don't know when our last breath comes. What will you do? There is an old meme saying, it predates memes, the saying, right? We all have 2 numbers and a dash on our tombstone. It's the dash that makes all the difference. There's another variation of that. You're born on one day, but it's the day that you learn the why that it all matters. Because what happens when you discover your why? And I would suggest that your why could be something as simple as, I want my life to count and matter. In Pearl Harbor, the movie, not necessarily the most historically accurate movie, but nonetheless an entertaining movie, one with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. A British pilot asked Ben Affleck's character, "Are all Yanks so anxious to die?" And Ben Affleck's character says, "I'm not anxious to die, I'm just anxious to matter." Now, we could argue that he's, maybe a little misguided and all that. Actually, I don't think he is, because he's offering his life in sacrifice of others, and there's nobility in that. But what a great line. I think we all want our lives to matter. I actually think that's part of the reason anxiety is so high today. Because we essentially tell people a bad message, that your life will have significance and matter when it's all about you. And that's craziness. That is not how significance works. Okay, so 4 rules plus a bonus rule. Life's not fair. Get over it. Life changes. Adjust. Life's tough. Be tougher. Life's short. Make it count. If your life's going to matter, it has to be about more than you. I'd love for you to learn these 5 rules. I'd love for you to incorporate them into your life. I really believe that if we could do this, we would start a revolution in our world. All right, what do you think? Is there one of the rules? What do you think of them? Did you not like one? Did you like one? Do you think one should be added? Should we make it 6 rules? Reach out and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you like this, feel free to share it with your friends. That really helps me. Give me a review somewhere. I'd love that as well. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.